When you're reading the heart line on a person's palm, it's very important to take into account also the girdle of Venus. It's this semicircular line here that runs in between the Jupiter and the Saturn fingers and lands in between the Apollo and the Mercury, the fourth and first fingers here. And now, it's not always present in every person's palm. Sometimes it just appears sort of broken. Other times you'll only see one side of it forming at all. And sometimes you'll even see it sort of fragmented, broken and scatty like this. It's not as important as the heart line itself in terms in the matters of the heart and emotions and physical health, but it is important. It's secondary to the heart line. Now, as the name implies, the girdle of Venus does imply a strong sort of, it reveals the sexual makeup of the person, the erotic urges, especially if we see a large and well-developed Venus mount. The girdle of Venus shows us these emotional and physical urges, and the Venus mount shows us the desire. Early palmists, early Western palmists, associated the girdle of Venus with sexual refinement and autoerotic tendencies, and it was also associated with prostitutes, pimps, drug dealers, people working in the sort of the seedy side of life, if you like. It was associated with criminals and crude sorts of people. However, in the West, we've come more now to understand the complexities of this line and associate it more with greater sensitivity and emotionality. And there's certainly a correlation here between this sensitivity and this emotional need with people who take drugs or utilize potentially unhealthy forms of escapism or coping mechanisms, because when we substitute drug taking, when we take drugs, when we fantasize, when we escape, when we stimulate ourselves, we are satiating this need for emotional connection. It's arguable that all life's vices are substitutes for emotional stimulation. Now, Fred Gettings argued that a clear and relatively short girdle of Venus, a clearly well-formed, marked out girdle of Venus, like the one we see here in this palm, is a sign of emotional alertness. It's my belief is that it's a sign of emotional intelligence when it's formed like this, and for that reason it's often seen in the hands of artists, musicians, creatives, and those that have an ability to relay these thoughts and feelings through their work. This understanding allows the ability to invoke feeling in others. They themselves are generally moved emotionally quite easily by certain stimuli, but also there's a sense of balance there in terms of their sexual psychological makeup. Now, this is an example of not a good girdle of Venus. We can see it's fragmented, broken, fractured, scatty. It's not clearly marked, it's unhealthy. If you look closely, you can even see a bit of an island forming here. The extent of this girdle of Venus takes up quite a large portion of the hand in itself, and actually seeks to come into contact with the heart line itself. There is an intuition line here as well that can be seen rising up and coming into contact with this girdle of Venus. Now, this in itself is a very profound marking, because this was on the hands of Charles Manson and Ted Bundy, I believe both have this, and it's this ability to utilize their intuition, and their intuition is connected with their sexual urges. At the very least, it's sort of hinting at sexual manipulation. Now, again, I just want to be clear that no one sign or symptom alone in palmistry can provide us with what we need to, for concrete proof, for a conclusion. But when we find several signs that all sort of point towards something, it becomes undeniable after a time. But in any case, this kind of girdle of Venus shows someone who has a difficulty fulfilling their emotional desires, their emotional sensitivity, and their sexual urges. This often leads to a kind of tension, a build-up, and that this release is required. And when we in any form have energy that builds up, it will come out in some sort of way, and if it's not released healthily, it will come out unhealthily. Now, this kind of extreme sensitivity seen in the palms is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does need to be recognized, identified, and this person really, requires understanding. They need guidance, they need counseling in understanding themselves, and this really is to avert this unhealthy release of tension. There's likely triggers here with this. As I say, this person is going to be a highly sensitive individual, and they will, possibly have temper tantrums, so to speak. They may well have explosive outbursts, and for onlookers or people that don't understand or know this person, they may well come across as unstable, but actually once the reasons for these potential triggers are understood, once a person is understood, once a person understands themselves, which palmistry is just so vital for, so useful for, then all of these issues can be solved. And sometimes, it's just something as simple as this pent-up nervous energy can be dealt with by just going for a weekly run. Meditation, having someone actually just listen. And listening is such a useful and powerful skill of communication, not because sometimes we don't even need someone to listen to us, but what we need is someone to pull the answers out of us and for us to hear ourselves say the words, to hear ourselves come to terms with how we're feeling and why. At the turn of the 20th century, this line was referred to as the line of hysteria. Gaslighting was rife during the adolescence of psychology. And really calling someone hysterical or emotional kind of makes a person feel weak. It points towards them having the problem. Whereas once all parties recognize who someone is, why someone behaves the way they do, then in actual fact we all become responsible for the triggers as well as our own behavior. Now the lines change, the lines on our palms do change. They can change, and they will change with the necessary treatment. And as I've already said, with actually sometimes just a little bit of listening and common sense, a lot of these issues will the potential crisis will be averted, and so too will these lines change as a result. One thing is for certain, those with a girdle of Venus do have a high sex drive. And actually, this line is probably more accurately, would be accurately referred to as the sex drive line, or the line of the sex life, or line of the libido. This is what Eugene Scheiman, MD, and Nathaniel Altman refer to it as in their book, Medical Palmistry, A Doctor's Guide to Better Health Through Hand Analysis. It's important to remember that the palm is divided into two realms, the unconscious realm and the conscious. Now this part of this section of the Girdle of Venus deals with our conscious ideas and thoughts and actions to do with our urges and our emotional sensitivity. The percussion side of our palm, or the ulnar side of our palm, deals with more of the unconscious. So any lines that kind of you see pulling away down onto this section, down into the very unconscious, imaginative, fantasy area, any lines kind of pulling away from the Girdle of Venus into this area shows this need for, dressing up in the bedroom, or deep, dark, and unrealistic, unhealthy fantasy, sexual fantasies. Potentially anyway, but again, it's important to look at other signs in the palm. And in fact, this person here, their headline, you can see just how low, this is incredible, just how low down their headline reaches, forks as well, into you know, the lower, most unrealistic realms of fantasy. If the girdle of Venus is unbroken, it could well show a marrying of the two conscious and unconscious sides of a person's sexual desires. There's a recognition there of what they require and desire consciously and unconsciously. And really, I think this shows a degree of self-understanding. If, however, there is a break here without something that is supporting that break, this could well show an unsatisfied libido. But to truly understand someone's sexual nature, a lot has to be taken into account. The Venus mount, the Mercury finger, the heart line in itself, and the girdle of Venus all must be taken into account to truly understand a person's sexual desires, their sex life, and the matters of the heart, their emotional and psychological makeup, their sexual psychological makeup as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what your thoughts are on the girdle of Venus. Perhaps you have one and you have some of the markings, some of the signs I've mentioned in this video. Maybe you'd like to email me with some of your questions. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe.